Okay, greetings all and welcome to another Wu-Sabat Outformation class UK, brought to you by All Eyes on Egypt, Midlands and the North. Appreciate your patience. We're just waiting for a few more people to get on the session today. So welcome if you've joined us on Zoom, and for those of you joining us on Facebook, thank you Hara M. Habab Jadefre Hatap for looking after the people for the introduction, and obviously will be the facilitator to help ask your questions today. We will be doing something a little bit different, so we will finish off the 9. So this is, I suppose, part 3 of that class. So that's finishing that off, and then I think I did say in a previous session that we would show this video, Cosmic Africa. And so we're going to do that a little bit later today. I'm not going to be able to show that video live on Facebook, so just for copyright reasons. So what we've done is put the link for the Zoom class into the Facebook chat. So you should be able to pick up that link. It'll take you about 20 seconds to register for Zoom, and then you'll be able to see that video once we show it. So that, I think, sets us up for a class that we're going to do later in the year, maybe around June time, called a Tuli Papyrus. So we just want to get into some of the stuff around that. So you can see basically how the ancients and still some cultures around the world today interacted with the stars. So a very rare DVD. I don't know if you can find that on YouTube or anything like that. So definitely one to take in and absorb. So, okay, so we're dealing with the Wu-Sabat today. So let's just do some introduction. So can you hear me okay? So I'm going to run a quick poll on the Zoom platform here. So can you hear me okay over the Om chant in the background? So I'm launching that poll now. So can you hear me okay sound-wise over the Om chant? Okay, just give you a few more seconds to respond to that. Okay, if you do have any problems with sound, I think everybody seems to be okay. But if you do, just put some comments there in the chat and give some feedback, and just say Hara M. Habab will do his best to try and assist you with that. Okay, so the next poll that I'm running is just around the visuals. So can you see the screen okay? So again, if you can answer in the affirmative or the negative in relation to that, as I say, you might have to swipe left or swipe right depending on the type of device that you have in order for the screen to appear. Okay, give you a few more seconds to answer that. Okay, seems we're okay in relation to that. Okay, so quick introduction just to the Zoom platform in fact, let's start off the class properly before we get into that, and start off the class in terms of connecting with our ancestors. This is something that as Sabaeans that we do culturally. So we're going to start off with the affirmation called Partak Yud, and then we'll say it in the Sabaean language and then translate into English for proper understanding. Abdoi Kale Namazurat Fakur Ame Kasam Un Empa Pa'ut. Begin all prayers and thinking as a part of the all. Anuki Jawef Pa Ashuk Empa Pa'ut Wu Kale Ashuk Kawun Jawef Neya. Anuki Kasam Un Empa Pa'ut Wu Pa Pa'ut Kawun Kasam Un Emneya. Anuki Wahu Ameh Pa Pa'ut Wu Pa Pa'ut Kawun Wahu Ameh Neya. Nakuk Kadur Najo Ameh Kasam Un Empa Pa'ut Wu Habub Ameh Mushachas Un. Nakuk Kadur Kawan Kale Pafef Nakuk Dayur Jawef Pa Pa'ut Ameh Wase Ameh Dayarni Kawun Lakei Bakoy Jawef Pa Pa'ut Anuki Abed Bi Nafashni Pa Pa'ut Kawun Anuki Pa Pa'ut Kadur Nakuk Kadur Pa Pa'ut Amur Nakuk Amur. Okay, so we'll take you back. We started by saying begin all prayers and thinking as a part of the all expanding. And then we said I am in the divine love of the all expanding, and all divine love is in me. I am a part of the all expanding, and the all expanding is a part of me. I am one as the all expanding, and the all expanding is one as me. I can succeed as a part of the all expanding and fail as an individual person. I can be all that I want in the all expanding as long as my want is to stay in the all expanding. I am never by myself. The all expanding is I am. The all expanding can, I can. The all expanding does, I do. So that was a positive affirmation, or that's prayer, meditation, proper diet, drinking plenty of water, etc. Getting enough sleep. All of these are aspects of positive thinking and part of our culture, to say aligning with our Slav or ancestors to start off the class positively so that everybody can get a great experience from what we are conveying today. So if you've not joined us on the Zoom platform before, a quick introduction to the way we use it. So on your panel, you'll see audio settings. Let's just go back. Audio settings, chat, raise hand, and Q&A. So if you need to adjust your audio settings for any reason, changing device, or it's not working properly, then you can do that by selecting this option here on the left-hand side. We also have the icon for the chat there. So any messages, feedback that's not questions that you want to be answered, or not questions for class, I suppose, then you can put that in the chat. Please select panelists and all participants. That just basically makes sure that everybody in the chat can see what you're saying, so you don't necessarily get duplicate questions, but say any feedback, etc., can go into the chat area, and that's what you should use it for. If you want to ask questions, and there's two ways to do that. So the first one is by raising your hand. So you've got that option there. Click on that, and it raises your hand. And that's if you've got a question for myself as a student teacher for today's session. Once you do raise your hand, Harat M. Habab as the facilitator today will assist you by calling out your name. He'll give you permission basically to speak, and that will mean that you're prompted to unmute your microphone. If you've dialed into the session today, then to raise your hand it's *9. To unmute your microphone it is *6. And so, as I say, in order for you to ask your question, you do need to unmute your phone, and then you're live to myself. Obviously, you can ask what you need to ask. What you'll then have is permission to mute and unmute yourself at will. So we just ask that you mute back your phone as to not disturb the enjoyment for the rest of the class. So the other way you can ask questions if you do not want to come live to myself is simply by putting a written question in the question answer section of the chat. That will then get reviewed, as say, by the facilitator, and then they'll ask that question for you on your behalf. If the question is not fully answered, or you've got a follow up, then just simply use the same medium again to ask your question. As I say, the facilitator will ask that question for you directly. Okay, sometimes we do have quizzes and poll questions, etc., just to help with your knowledge and understanding and retention. We're not here just as a form of, we're not here as a form of entertainment. I suppose you're here to learn, and we obviously are seeking to teach you this doctrine of Wu-Sabat that has been gifted to us by our ancestors by way of the master teacher, Dr. Malachi Z. York. So sometimes we will use this medium to assist with that learning. We haven't got any poll questions today. Some of you will be glad to know. But yeah, so sometimes that can happen in the future, as you just experienced with the sound and vision check. If you're on Facebook, then, as I say, you can't answer poll questions directly. So if you want the full interactive experience, then feel free to join us on Zoom. Okay, so let's get into today's session. So we'll do a brief introduction. What I would say is that we've probably done a more detailed one, or not probably, but we have done a more detailed one in part 1 of the 9 in our YouTube channel. So the link can be posted in the chat if you're not familiar with that. All Eyes on Egypt, Midlands in the North. Just do that search on YouTube. It's Egypt with an I, not a Y. And to say you can pick up any previous sessions that we've done on YouTube in their full HD glory. And so, yeah, you might want to go back to part 1 if you want a larger introduction. But if, as I say, something's not clear, then by all means, do not sit there in ignorance. Feel free to ask questions. So importantly, I suppose, who is the master teacher, who we call the master teacher, and referred to as the master teacher not from a point of ego, but rather telling you who and what he is in terms of a master at teaching. Understood? And he was, say, name in English as Dr. Malachi Z. York, born in Ghana, Takoradi, in 1945, June 26, which also happens to be the Sabaean New Year on our own time system and calendar, which we're going to get into in a future class. And importantly, he was born to a sacred feminine by the name of Mary Abba York, who was known as Fatima Maryam. She was born, say, March 10th, 1929, as you can see there. And as I say, arguably, one of the most important women, certainly born in the previous cycle, because, as I say, as a people, we still find ourselves in the same conditions that we are in today. So it's important, as I say, that the matriarchal aspect is brought back to the forefront, because we were matriarchal people as opposed to patriarchal when we were in our right mind and culture in ancient Africa, and that basically coincides or follows natural nature through obviously mitochondrial DNA, where your lineage or the line age is carried through the female line. So it's important who your mother is, because they carry obviously our generational story in their genes. So she was specially selected, one may argue, and as I say, she gave birth and configured the birth of the master teacher, who we know as, say, Dr. Malachi Z. York, and fashioned her in her womb. Now, the forces of Wu-Sabat, which is the spiritual science of the Nagarnadu or Negroids, which is what enables us to unify mentally, and then allows us to then follow that with the physical unity, are feminine forces. So the feminine forces of natural nature are the ones, as I say, who brought or restored back or sought to restore back the culture of Wu-Sabat. And when that time happens, as I say, it always visits the minds of the posterity or minds of the descendants first. And that's been done by way of Mary Abba Dr.York, also known as Fatima. And this is her excellency, as she has transitioned, as I say, now to be one of our ancestors to call upon, say, for your own bloodline in the outfit, the crown of the clan mother of the Musbatu or Sabaeans, as you can see there, what she's adorning on top of her head. Now, his father was, a great man, individual, as part of the royal family out of Sudan, as you can see on the screen, Al-Hadi Abdur Rahman Al-Mahdi, born 1922, and unfortunately was assassinated in 1970. Excuse me. And as I say, it comes from a great family linked to his grandfather, Al-Mahdi, Mustafa Muhammad Al-Mahdi of the Sudan, born 1845 to 1885. Yeah, so look him up in their so-called history books. They don't want to acknowledge that he was a Nagarnadu or Negroid linked to the Dongolawe tribe, not Sudanese directly, but really one of the Kadem Mukmatu, one of the ancient Egyptians, pre-dynastic link to those, and a master spiritualist. So Mahdi means guide, and many don't accept in the Islamic world that he is that individual because his freckles are too close. So the racism in the cancer of racism in monotheistic religion still there today means that, as I say, greatness is never acknowledged if the person's skin unfortunately is too dark. So despite what they may say, as I say, all things, all roads lead back to ancient Egypt, and all part of a larger plan by Parnatharu, as I say, to restore us back at least to our rightful place as caretakers of this planet. Age 25, this is the master teacher, and as I say, in our story, being known in ancient Egypt as the Amunabab Reye Achakhta, you understand, which is a vehicle or a vessel that allows our ancestors to speak to or convey outformation coming to us in the form of information necessary to aid our transformation, was, as I say, constructed as part of a plan. This seems very odd and sounds quite crazy in a society today, because obviously in the so-called Hollywood, which is the same wood, interesting enough, that Merlin, a mythological creature in their stories, wand was made from. Yes, in the way they cast spells in movies. They've ran up ahead and given a certain interpretation of extraterrestrials and various different things. So our interpretation of these things oftentimes is Hollywood based. But in our story, before the television, as I say, our story had to be renewed, and that's done through the forces of natural nature. That Amunabab Areye Achakhta in ancient Egypt was known as, the being was known as Tahuti. That's what they referred to this individual as. Obviously, in the new cycle information in Wu-Sabat, you're getting the real tones as they were given back then, obviously reimagined for us in this day and time. So the way in which we were realigned with natural nature was through certain individuals being born into the world with a specific purpose, as I say, to convey the information that we need to transform us. That's not exclusive to us as the Nagaru race. Different extraterrestrials or ancestors who have created their line or lineage here on earth send teachers, obviously, to their individuals and people. So this means that because your spirituality is linked to your genealogy, i.e. your DNA and RNA, so we were energy beings before we manifested here into the physical as animists. That's what our viewpoint, or Za'am, our opinion or viewpoint in terms of our spirituality or religion, for lack of a better word in that regard, it's all interlinked. So energy before we became material, and they are still connected. So this is why a person can't choose in a sense. And when I say choose, I mean choose for it to work, and it would work for them to be any religion that they may feel, because that's what happens in society. We have multiple choices of religions, and the person selects and says, I want to be a Christian, Muslim, whatever. Seems now today Satanist is one of the options now, if we're looking at some certain music videos that have recently been released. So you can choose whichever one you want, but whether it works for you will determine whether that religion, in terms of the way it was created, was aligned for your race. Understand? If it's not, then that religion's not going to work for you, because you're calling upon ancestors or deities that have nothing to do with your genealogy. Understand? There's a master secret called Why No Help from Above, from above, and it deals with the science of that. You have to call upon forces or sources of that relate to your genealogy. So, and many examples are given of how that has not worked within so-called history or the past for individuals, for events, because they've been calling upon the wrong names, which, as I say, are not empowered, or they do not have a genetic link which informs the spiritual link to that source of power. So our ancestry, or the solution for us spiritually, is always going to come through our own genealogy. Do you understand? But obviously, because of the poison which has been placed in our genes through forcibly, in a lot of instances, as I say, through the Mukasu or Caucasian, we think about 400 years ago in the so-called slave trade, although nothing was traded, the kidnapping. Our genes were intercepted forcibly in a lot of ways, and as I say, it created a new type of being called the Negro, N-E-G-R-O, the Negro, you understand? And so that's a hybrid type of individual, cultural hybrid, we would say, that was created in a new type of mindset, and obviously we forgot who we were. So a solution was necessary, obviously, to fix those types of issues in this last, or the cycle leading up to the year 2000, which we'll get into later on in this class. And so the way in which that works is our ancestors in-house this Amun Babre Akhtar, as I say, to give us information that's necessary for this day and time. So at that time, that being from 1970 down to 1996, where we went through the various different religious degrees, that the elder that in-housed Dr. Malachi Z, or Imam Isa, as he was known then at that time, was El Khadir, the Green One. And that took us up to 1996 with the introduction of a book referred to as the Holy Tablets, which, as we said in this class before, this was the bridge between religion and reality. So when the elders originally came in 1960, well, it came before that, but prominently in 1963, 1970 officially, the doctrine that they were teaching was Wu-Sabat in its raw form, one may state, but as I say, it was too heavy for the people at that time. So books like the Nine Ball, etc., which today, because so much information has been released, would be a lot easier for people to read. And actually, if you read the Nine Ball today, which is still relevant, it is a roadmap to how to for our people to walk themselves out of the conditions that we find ourselves in today. An absolute step-by-step roadmap on how to do that, all the way from describing various different situations. And one of them, for example, being about children and how you're supposed to use a school system. And obviously here, some of us born here in the Western Hemisphere, and how we're supposed to be using the system or utilizing the system to work our way out, so that obviously we have ownership back again of businesses, obviously land, assets, various different things. So you're working to work your way out, so like everybody else, you can establish your own culture, have ownership and have autonomy over self. And one of the jewels that it gives us is about children in school. For example, they give their careers advice, certainly in the UK, but they give their careers advice, at 15. They're starting career discussions at 15. In England, one year before you're due to exit school. It's a bit longer now. But obviously, if you want to be a pilot, for example, and you didn't pick the right subjects, or you're messing around, by the time you get to finish school, you've not utilized it to your advantage. You understand? So the reality of the situation is 9 balls, 10 where you need to make those decisions about career with children at around about age 9 and 10. So, and some people say, well, no, they're too young for that. They're too young. Why are you putting too much pressure on the children? But obviously, if you don't use school in the right way, it has obviously, consequences for a person's life going forward, especially if you're not coming from, a position of means. Your family's not in a position of means. You need to use the so-called education system in the best way that you can do. You understand, for your circumstances, even though it's rigged against you in certain ways. But allowing the children to choose their career early, it means that you make the system work for you. So obviously you're going to choose the subjects and different things that you want to study that are going to help you. You understand, if you want to be a pilot, you're not waiting until the end of when you're going to exit school and then realise, damn, I should have paid more attention in maths because I really wanted to be, a fighter pilot or a commercial pilot or whatever, but I haven't got the grades to do that. And then that takes you down another path. So the 9 ball in these types of books were given in a certain form and a certain type of language, as I say. But back then, it wasn't ready. But obviously the evolution over time, different things, information being released into the media, certain things that were written in books back then that were being spoon-fed, and then, as I say, maybe appeared in documentaries and things of that nature, made those things more palatable to our people, all the way up, as I say, until 1996, where we were then ready to embrace the new cycle information, and that required a new combination of physical and esoteric in order to deliver the new cycle information, new language, new tones, and really fully embrace who we were in terms of the what, to transform to become who we are. And so that combination was now then known as Malachi Z, Dr.York or Quran, and the Ifrik being in house known as is known as Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn. So the new cycle information, or hereafter into the thereafter, doctrine of Wu-Sabat in the form of actual facts, master secrets, and Ba'h, which means the way. Yeah, so this is a combination, as I say, of a well orchestrated plan, one might say, to remove the spell that has kept our people mentally trapped, and as I say, to try and teach us again who and what we are, our true purpose here on this planet, and as is the right of all races on the planet, understand what our ascension pathway is. So, you can see on the screen a long line of different teachers have come along, each with a piece of the puzzle or the story, until finally the last one came, Dr. Malachi, could be New York or Cran, to put the whole thing together. Understood? So you're striving for perfection in this particular realm and to become 720 again, 360 degrees mastery of the physical, 360 degrees mastery of the esoteric to make you 720 again, complete. So the resurrection that is taking place is obviously a mental resurrection, and it starts obviously with you see, that's why symbolically you see Khafrei or Khafrei, some say, when he's depicted, if you look up that name, Khafrei, his name actually means the transformational power of Ray. You see Khafrei sitting there. You see Khafrei sitting, depicted anthropomorphically, sitting on a chair, and his head is shown as the dung or scarab beetle. Understood? And the scarab beetle was thought to, in symbolism, was thought to push the sun, as I say, from east to west over the sky. But obviously, looking at those things now, you can see that picture obviously is symbolic, isn't it? Transformational power of Ray. Well, what is Ray in that situation? Well, as we taught you, I think, in last month's class, you see the different positions of the sun, isn't it? The sun in the morning, Atum, the position of the sun at noon, Atun, the position of the sun as it appears to set, referred to as Amun. So those are the positions, and then obviously the sun that you perceive but don't see is the Anun point. Now, the individual, clearly, when the sun is in that position, then it combines, isn't it? So you get Atum Ray or Atum Ray in the morning, obviously Atun Ray, and then Amun Ray, when the sun is in that position. So obviously, if Khafrei's head, which was a dung beetle associated with the movement of that sun, symbolically from right to left to somebody standing on earth looking upwards, what's it saying? It's saying, well, the transformation of Ray is a mental transformation, isn't it? So you're transforming from right knowledge, or Atum Raye, right wisdom, which is the application of knowledge, Atun Raye, into right understanding, which is Amun Raye, leading to right understanding, leading to sound right reasoning. And for a very select few, they may reach the point of inner standing. Understood? So the transformation is mental in this day and time. Hence why we were sent a teacher, or a prolific teacher, who was also a prolific author, and has conveyed that information in the form of books, and forcing us to have to read again, or re-add that knowledge which was lost. And as I say, a long line of great teachers, and as I say, uncovering or removing this spell from our eyes, as I say, cast by the Mukasu and various different groups, as I say, of extraterrestrials who had a vested interest in utilizing human beings for food, labor, for their own purposes, not interested, certainly for our race, in our transformational or ascension pathway. Understood? And so books like the Bible, etc., are not part of our story. That is part of his story, the Caucasian or the Mukasu, but we have been tricked and led to believe that is his story is our story. And I say, all it has led to is to cause us to be subservient to another race. This is what monotheistic religions have done for our people, and that may be harsh sounding for those maybe still in those things. It's not meant to be, but it's just the reality of the situation. And it's why, as I say, because of the care and compassion of our ancestors, we were walked through various different schools. So because obviously when you're trying to cure somebody, hence why it's referred to as doctor. Part of the cure that we were suffering from, being poisoned or brain dirtied by this system, and need to be brainwashed of that. Well, part of the solution was that the poison or that was in the solution, so i.e. the antidote. In an antidote, part of that which is poisoned you is in the actual medicine itself. And so, as you can see, with us learning about the lesser mysteries, part of the bad information that we were learning about, which was bad for our structure anyway, I say was in the solution, understood, that we learnt about. So it's not necessary for somebody coming into contact with Wu-Sabat now to learn all those lesser mysteries and lesser degrees. So you don't necessarily find them in the newer books, but obviously if people are interested or want to become teachers, etc., then to help others, they may go back and study these in much more detail. But as I say, it's what our people has been suffering from. And as I say, it has disconnected us from our real source of power, understood, which is your great-grandmother, great-grandfather, so on and so on, who've passed. Because as I say, when a person looks at you as an individual, even though they don't know your parents, obviously the power of reasoning means that you must have a mother and father. If you're standing there as a human being, you must have a mother and father, and then their mother and father, and so on and so forth. That is being referred to as our soul seed. Understood? So it's quite clear who we were supposed to be calling upon. What they teach you in religion is to jump back to 1400 years to a person named Muhammad, who you got no connection with, and call upon his name if you're in the degree of Islam. Jump back 2,000 years to a man named Jesus, miss out everybody of relevance in between, don't remember who your 4 generations are, don't remember the names of your ancestors, don't remember the contribution of any of these people. Jump back and give all the praise to a person that you can't even prove existed 2,000 years ago. Same with Moses, and then all the way back to the God, which actually all the depictions of what they show is nothing but Caucasian men, let's be quite honest, the angels. And all of the people connected to God, even God himself. Look at the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo. Then, as I say, you see the images that have been portrayed. Never us. So that causes you to be subservient to another race. In their religions, they're the top people. Everybody else around the planet, in their religions, they're the top person. The images of the individuals are in and look like them. And it's us. We have to settle to worship a God that doesn't look like us. And then when we put something in place that does look like us, then we're a cult. You understand? Then we're now crazy for giving credence to people who look exactly how we look. And we're crazy when everybody else does the same thing, because they want to utilize and direct your power to aid them. But obviously not in this day and time. Wu-Sabat and the master teacher through various books, over 1,000, put the squeeze on the straw that people have been using to suck our soul from our culture. You see many people making money off of our pain, many people out there making money off of our culture, our misery, you understand, our soul, things that we've been through, etc., and are ready to keep coming to the culture with, as I say, the straw to sip on the nectar of our soul, which, as I say, has come from pain, suffering, injustice, etc., and come to suck and feed off of our grief. We have to start to grab that straw, understand, throw it in the bin, and never give access to it again by raising our vibrational level to a point where we can't be touched by, say, these lower or adverse forces. So, a little bit of a long introduction. Let's get into where we were previously. Any questions on any of the mediums at the moment?
Not currently. I can't see any questions here at the moment.
Okay, so we were getting you into the 9. I think this is some of the language is slightly older because the language is always evolving. So Pa Mutsahu It's a translation of the 9. And we were giving you really about, as I say, different, I suppose, an explanation of how your ancestors, I say, conveyed information in various different ways, understood, to connect you to outformational sources, understood. So outformation is effectively what we're receiving from outside of the planet Earth, understood. And so outformation, or outforming an individual, is clearly where we're seeking to get to. And what needs to happen to outformation, it needs to be changed or altered to make it palatable, receivable, understood, effective, in a sense. So it's transformed into information to aid us in transforming back, or raising our vibrational rate higher into outformational beings once again. So Wu-Sabat, as the science of the Nagaru, transforms information into outformation. So that's one of its characteristics. So you understand that we are the information. We are in a certain formation that need to be transformed into, as I say, who and what we are as children of how the Egyptians, or the Kadem Matu, are referred to as the Natharu, which means overseers. In our mind, when we think of that term, we should think suns, S-U-N, suns or stars. Understood? Very important that we start to realign that type of thinking back to what is taking place, because obviously through religion, or many of us who are let's say, painted with that brush or programmed with that set of bad information, and it's bad because it doesn't teach us about the reality of who we are. Understood? So, and it creates an unnatural separation in that regard. So, and our teachings in our culture, when we were living to the best of our natural abilities, it wasn't like that. Everything was intertwined with the environment. Everything was intertwined with natural nature, which the world now is being forced to go back to, isn't it? With the challenges of climate change and sustainability, etc. All of these things are bringing challenges where actually the way we, not us specifically, but obviously we're here, so you've got to say we, in the West particularly, have messed up the planet, through our actions. Certainly industrialization and different things have not respected the gift, which is the planet Earth and the environment, as the more primitive tribes on the planet have done, worked and lived in sync and in accordance with the environment. We haven't done that. So now, we're on the brink of, serious climate impacts on the planet, and we have to get back in alignment. So they realize that way of living or working is actually the right kind of way. Now, if they'd followed the ways of our ancestors and not sought to exploit people, trick people, steal from, people, then the world would be a much more cohesive place. But racism and the mindset of, unfortunately, the Mukasu or the Caucasian, in the way in which they do things in a predatory manner, has in the last 6,000 years caused much problems and chaos on the planet. And obviously living in the Western Hemisphere and being in and around that environment has affected the way we do things as well. So we have to go through a process of healing, and as I say, reinduction back to what it truly means to be us. Because no one's going to tell you that other than you. He knows certain things about us, but keeps that very well hidden in museums and things of that nature. And so you never get to really know the full story from them, and they don't see it as their responsibility or duty to teach you about who you are spiritually or esoterically. So the importance, obviously, about symbols, as you see here, from natural ether energy, just touching a little bit about what we were talking about before. And you see the verse there saying that we used Ramaz symbol to explain the example of the Olam Sahamat, the hidden powers of visible yet invisible bara space. So the environment that we're in, as you are familiar with, is 90% darkness. 90% of the environment we're in, we talk about all an expanding existence, but the environment that we find ourselves in, you have to understand environment, very important to do so, because we are part of existence, we're part of the surroundings. It makes up who we are. You're not just your physical structure or your physical body. 24% of your DNA is in a transient state. It's constantly changing based on our environment. So we are a part of that environment, and so therefore you have to understand, you have to be caretakers of it, because in caretaking the environment, we're caretaking of us. Understood? Now, about 90% of it is darkness. So we use symbolism because obviously we can't see certain things, but it gives understanding. It gives, it alludes to, it helps to get hidden, more in-depth meaning of what a thing is by using symbols. It also has the effect of hiding what symbols mean, or messages that can be conveyed for those who are not worthy of it, because the true powers that we have, which are dormant, is the best way to describe it, need to be unlocked as part of your transformation, so that one can use it, say, for the benefit not only of the environment, but the benefit of others. So symbolism is an important aspect of our culture. And so if you looked at the various different schools that we went through, one of those schools was the school of Masonry, because Masonry teaches about the language of symbolism. Now, before the Europeans were taught certain aspects of it by the Moors, which is nothing to do with ancient Egypt, your various different mystery school system was all based upon transition points or growth points within nature. So obviously at 13 or 12 to 13, in years, nature says, okay, well, when a man has his first wet dream, when a woman has her first menstrual cycle, so that's when the person becomes obviously a man in the case of release of semen, and a woman in the case of a menstrual cycle. Does that mean that you're ready to get married and have children, etc.? Well, nature gives you that power, but you're just not mentally there yet. So therefore, we would build structures around that transition or change that's to happen to support us, obviously, in what we need to know to fulfill or activate, or so these genetic explosions, force us to grow. Because if the next transition point or next step in growth is obviously at 40 years old, where you become an adult. You understand? If you don't have a certain set of experiences, it doesn't trigger these genetic explosions within you, and you can have some very childish 40+ year olds. You understand? People who constantly get into arguments, very childish, selfish, different traits or whatever. You can have some childish 40-year-olds. You understand? Because that next level of growth or maturity, where you truly become an adult, you've not reached that. So we had rituals and things, certain orders that were designed to obviously optimize our experience here, and help us to fulfill our potential. Understood? So unlike these arbitrary dates like 16, 18, 21, yes, which have no relevant meaning to what we're saying. We had orders to bring that out. So the interesting thing about Freemasonry is that, as I say, it's the language of symbolism. So, who are the masters of symbolism on the planet? Well, walk back to us in ancient Egypt, the masters of, a picture tells a story of 1,000 words. And we don't keep records in the way that we used to back then. So one of the things, certainly when, not to knock out people, but when sometimes we get together, the basic things we don't like to do. And so we're doing business and things of that nature, write things down, plan, keep records of meetings, different things. It's always hard to get people to do the underlying basic things. Everybody wants to be the star in the room. You understand? Everybody wants to be the woman or the man. You understand? No one wants to serve anymore. Understood? And you're not going to truly bring out the greatness in yourself, the true powers of you, until you start to serve other people. You understand? Or service others without, with neutral intentions. You understand? Without wish to gain or benefit. Understood? Just in service. You think about the sun, 93 million miles away. It's in a state of service. Understood? As many different stars are. It gave us life here on Earth. You understand? And monotheistic religion taught us to ignore those realities. So, and how can you give praise to Jesus when you can't prove that the being even existed and jump over your mother and father? You understand? Whether the person was a good person to you or not, the reality of that situation is that sperm and that ovum doesn't come together. There's no you. That's straight up reality. And it doesn't matter how much faith and belief people have got. It's just obviously how the natural rules work. And we know the power, obviously, that is in there. But symbolism, not to get too much off the topic, but symbolism is powerful. And it's the way in which, as I say, or one of the means in which we need to understand that in terms of our ancestors conveying to us, hey, what's the purpose of life? What's all this all about? And who are we really? So on and so forth. Certain clues have been left in these symbols. And hidden power. Which for some, or for many, I should say, we have yet to tap into correctly, which is why you need somebody who knows. You understand? I.e., the master teacher. You need an example who knows how to aid us in that transformation. This is why that Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn becomes so important in this day and time. And as you know, any leader that's come and tried to raise the vibration of our people, tried to get us to work together in love and unity, they've assassinated, killed, assassinated their character. Understood? Yeah, because they don't want us to rise up and raise up. This cancer of this thing called racism, you understand, is permeating this planet. And as I say, it is one of the most destructive ideologies that, as I say, hurt this development of the human race on this planet more acutely for the last 6,000 years, as is when art masquerades as fact. So when art appears as fact, it seems to be devastating for human development. So somebody paints a white Jesus with long hair and then makes a movie about it and then pushes that movie out on you. Obviously that has devastating consequences for our mental development as Nagaru. No context, no understanding of the universe, no understanding of how race works on the planet, no understanding of physical ethers, how we got here, so on and so forth. That has proven itself to be mentally damaging for us as a people. It's taken years in some cases to even remove that, and still even today, when people grasp their own stuff, they still want to use the biblical, Quranic, in a sense, Hebraic concepts and try and walk that back into ancient Egypt, ancient Africa, where, as I say, at a certain point, it's got nothing to do with any of that poor and bad information. So symbolism, as you can see here, helping us to understand the power of the invisible into the visible, that link. It's very, very important. So we spent a lot of time going through or giving you some understanding to show you that actually Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn had, again, secreted, you understand, the secrets, secreted this outformation or symbolism or the safaf script to us in various different ways. And what we were explaining to you, more than going through the 9 and showing you, hey, this is what this the bad boy doctrine in it means, you understand, this is the heaviness of it, so on and so forth. But it's getting you to pay more attention to details, because your brain is funny. If it doesn't have the knowledge of a thing, or it doesn't understand something, it tends to ignore it. And so what we were getting us to do or think about as Nagarnadu, Negroids, you understand, as Musbatu, ones who consider themselves Sabaeans, understood, is to pay attention to the detail. The who, what, where, why, obviously clearly are crucial knowledge questions for us. And so we were getting to look at certain things, pay attention to you. You might not understand everything, but sometimes it's about just taking it in and paying attention to what's being shown. And so, as I say, in this case, as Fatima, you understand, Grandma's words of wisdom say, you judge a book by its cover and its content. I said, don't judge a book by its cover. But Grandma Fatima said, no, that's foolishness. You judge a book by its cover and its contents. Otherwise, how would you know what the book is if you don't judge it by its cover? That's where the title is, you understand, on the front, on the spine of some books. So on and so forth. So we were giving you an inkling into this world of symbolism and how, as I say, it's been sprinkled throughout our doctrine, and how, as I say, the gift of it, the fact that, as I say, maybe the evidence that our words of prayer and the corresponding aspect of that is meditation was being effective, was the fact that, as I say, we were getting to understand these safaf, falsely called hieroglyphs, once again. We were starting to understand or gain insight into what these pictures, with their hidden meaning, were starting to convey. Now, all of that was leading to us into the importance of the language. There's a couple of things, there's a few things when the elders have been trying to teach us, Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, the master teacher, has been trying to teach us, which some people, I'm not saying all, but a lot of people find difficult to absorb. And one of those things is learning the language in terms of transforming one's self. We do have an element of self-destruction in our genes, which you have to be aware of. Understood? And sometimes when you're coming from certain places, council estates, projects, obviously stateside, different things of that nature, sometimes environment, it can hamper one's ability not only to see success, but to grab onto it and do the things necessary to pull you out of that position. Do you understand? So sometimes a lot of work has been done by the master, particularly spiritually, to help build people's confidence, because say one thing goes wrong, one little trip, one little fall, and people are ready to give it up. You understand? On some YOLO mentality. You only live once, and do what you want when it's actually you have to be in it for the long term. And one of the things we conveyed to you in those previous classes is how many cycles are built into our genes and system to enable us to reach perfection. And up to 24,000 opportunities to try and get it right. So it's showing you it's not easy. It's not as they say in their story. Well, it's easier to go through. I think go through the eye of a needle than to make it to the kingdom of God. Well, the reality of the situation is it's quite easy to go through the eye of a needle. You just need to put one of your cells through the eye of a needle, then you've gone through the eye of a needle. Yeah, put spit into the eye of a needle or whatever. That's you going through the eye of a needle. So reality is to make it to the higher realms, or to beat death, so on and so forth, is obviously very difficult. So and so this is why you're given a lot of opportunities to do so. So nature works in abundance. It deals with or seeks to deal with things that guarantee a certain type of outcome. So you think about a single ejection, 777,777,777 sperm. One or two are going to make it, isn't it, to fertilize the ovum. So you see the abundance for necessary or needed for a certain type of result. Understood? So nature works in abundance. That doesn't mean that you must take liberties with the time that one has. Every time or every moment is precious. Now, so we were talking to you about the importance, as I say, of us taking in the language and how it helps us to align, and how it's going to read one way in English and it's going to read differently when it's in our language, and how we have to take the opportunity, I suppose, to get to a place where we understand it well enough that certain outformation can be conveyed to us in the form of information in our own language. Yes, because when something is being translated from another language, you're going to lose some of the meaning. You're going to lose some of the understanding. We're trying to, or we're seeking to lower that which is symbolically above and bring it down to our level of understanding, rather than raise ourselves up, obviously, to understand a particular subject where it's at. And that doesn't mean to say that when certain subjects are being taught that, well, if it's too heavy, you just understand, you just don't get it. You understand? There's no way to help individuals to get to that place or space. But what it's saying is that we need to put, more effort and more quality effort into researching, do you understand, and seek and having the right type of intentions to really seek to master what the master's put on the table. So it's called the master teacher, but you have to be intentional about, okay, well, let me master what this Nagarnadu or black man is trying to teach, you understand, which you're programmed to be anti that. You understand? Part of that spell is not to recognize leadership in your own skin color. Yeah, so that's just one of the reasons why people are always looking for the Mukasu or so-called authorized sources to confirm, what's being given to you and conveyed to you by your own, because systematically you were taught that the authority, the voice to be heard was the white male in the sun first, white female, and so on and so forth. We were down the ladder somewhere, which is why sometimes in certain relationships or whatever, you're speaking, but you're not speaking with necessarily authority. To both male and females, you're speaking and saying something, and what you're saying is not being respected, even though you're right. Then somebody else comes along now, let's say, of a different shade, say exactly the same thing that you taught. All of a sudden, it gets absorbed by the individual or the person. So all of these stupid little tricks have been programmed from a very young age, and as I say, choosing a doctrine and a language which was not part of the multiple choices given to us in the society is the first real decision that we've taken. It's not part of his multiple choices. He's not going to teach you about the misbat-iya language or alphabet or tones or whatever. He's not going to choose that and point you in that direction. So if you go seek it out, they may direct you in a certain type, but you're going to pay thousands to try and learn what we're giving you and what the master teacher has given us over the years, sacrifice for, and what today we're giving you pretty much for free. So we went through the harafat, or the alphabet, Sabaean alphabet, in some detail the last time, to seek out parts part 2 of this session to go into that in some detail. So I'm not going to go back over that right now just because of time. So I am going to skip through this. Are there any questions?
No questions.
So the science of this was to say that you sort of go through each letter, and as you're writing, that you sound out that letter. So you connect the picture with the sound. You understand? You're not trying to say, oh, this is the English equivalent, although obviously for our understanding, you need to understand the transliteration, or what is its English equivalent, because that's just helping you to understand the language. What it does teach you when you're starting to learn a new language is you don't actually understand English properly. You understand, from a grammatical perspective, and it forces you to have to do your own research. What are pronouns? What's a noun? What's a verb? You understand? The different things that we learn in school and put down in some instances. And so it forces you to have to learn about structures of languages again as you learn a new language. Now, most people on the planet, a lot of people on the planet are bilingual in certain or multilingual in a lot of cases. So the reality is, for us, it can't be that difficult. You understand? Just because in some countries in the Western Hemisphere, particularly the UK and in the States, because we speak English, it gives you a false sense of superiority. You understand? Even though English is one of the dumbest, if not the dumbest language on the planet, and the alphabet, as we explained before, doesn't even have 26 unique sounds. Yeah, as I say, F is EF. You understand? Yeah, so it hasn't got unique sounding letters in its alphabet. So someone wasn't intelligent enough, you understand, to think of individual sounds unique for these letters, or words that have double meaning, so on and so forth. So this creates a lot of confusion. There's a lot of dumbness, obviously, in the language, but you need it to communicate. And for us, it's a means to an end. But to establish a culture, you have to have your own language. And this is why it's important for us living in this day and time to make that a reality individually. And that starts with obviously you starting to learn the language and then being confident enough, I suppose, to speak to others and start to communicate. That's what's going to make it real. You understand? Other than that, it's just words on a page until you start using it. You understand? And then bringing that reality in. So, don't be looking for some leader or somebody to be pulling you along all the time. There's things that you can do yourself. You understand? As your own master. Understood? So you have your own role to play, and eventually you realize, okay, well, in order to help myself, it's also good to teach others, isn't it? Each one teach one. So in helping others, I'm also helping myself. This is a science of each one teach one. So as you're learning and you're teaching other people, you're also learning yourself. So this is how you become more collective, much more together. You understand? And not everything around the planet is a Western mindset or mentality. You understand? As people from the islands, people from Africa in certain places or whatever, may better understand slightly different mindset, that we have here in the Western Hemisphere. If you're not exposed in terms of travel, going to other places, you may not realise that there are options, you understand, that maybe we've yet to explore through experience. Now, so let's say we went through language in some detail, and so the 9, obviously, the way what we were asking you to pay attention, because the 9 is structured a certain way. And so this is what we were seeking really to get people to pay attention to, because it's not a large book, but it's seeking really to get us to pay attention. It's trying to teach us a language, because obviously there's one type of experience reading it in Sabaean. There's another type of experience reading it in the transliteration of Sabaean language, and then there's another type of experience reading it in English. So in 3 ways, you're being taught, in a 3 dimensional way in 3 degrees. You're getting 3 degrees at the same time if you choose to absorb and take up the challenge of what's being presented to you. Or you could apply ignorance to say, well, I'll just jump straight to the English. Now, that may be appropriate for a quick read or whatever the case may be, but don't ignore what's been put in front of you. So don't ignore what the teacher is trying to convey to you. Pay attention to it all. Sometimes you have to take time and read more slowly. You understand, for example, every word, sometimes we read and there's a word in the sentence we don't understand and we gloss over it. The day and time that you're living in now, there's no excuse. You're living in the information age. Your ancestors are the ones who made it possible for this shift in technology, which obviously they've used for adverse, nefarious purposes, as well as some good. I'm not going to crap on the whole system, but it's also enabled us, or the meek to dumbfound the wise, as they say in their books, us to come up also, because we have a mindset, or Sabaean has a mindset to look things up, research, and check things out. So curiosity doesn't kill the cat. You need curiosity, or starting that quest through questioning and research and seeking confirmation, ultimately. This is what we're looking for. So in the introduction, you see, as say, it's fully in Sabaean, and if you start with kind of the mastery of the alphabet. I'm not saying you must start with that, but start with the mastery of the alphabet. Then the next thing, obviously, is going to be to practice reading in the language. Now, sometimes you'll see in the books, in where the language has been conveyed, you'll see same rules, right to left in English. But sometimes you're going to see it, which I'll show you an example a bit later, where you see it from right to left. Now, language can be written left to right, right to left, up, down, in the sun, as you can see with some of those safaf script, and in some of the examples that we showed you previously. So obviously, getting to understand means that, okay, you might start to recognize individual letters, but eventually you're going to be picking up individual words. You're going to be able to see a word and say, oh, okay, I know what that is. You understand? So interesting enough, here on this line, this is the master teacher's name. In here. So it's the master teacher's name. And so I want to show you something of interest, which you might not have been paying attention to. So let's just go down here. So here we can see in the introduction, it says, let me Atum Ray, or pronounced Raye, inform you it was me who guided the hand of Malachi Z York Akran. So here we see it as Malachi Z York Akran, correct? Yeah, that's how we're seeing it here. Now, when we go to the same, and you can use little, things to help yourself. You see your dad, isn't it? Hand, M here of, and then you can see the name here, Malachi. Now, here you see in English, we've got a Z. In English, it's showing a Z. Correct? That was shown in English. But here, this is me, le, it's then here, ke, it's then yeah. And so Malachi or Maliki, and this is 2 letters here. And this is a hard so, and then this is the t sound, so. So it's Maliki or Malachi, so. It's not a Z in English. Now, when we go down to the transliteration, we can see here, that we see, Malaki, so, Kwabina, you understand? York, Akran, in the transliteration. So the point is that is not the same in English. So there's a different meaning when you start to look at it in the Sabaean language. So there's no Z. Yeah, there's no Z. So when we tell you, pay attention to what's going on, obviously, because this class is going out, obviously whoever's listening, we're giving, some of the stuff out to the Mukasu, you understand? But the reality is that we need to start paying attention to detail because, the message is different in our language. And the reward, let's say, isn't it? The reward, that hidden meaning is going to be for those who put the work in, start paying attention, who respect their culture enough. Now, everybody's got busy lives, so on and so forth, but respect it enough, as I say, to start to really put that work in and effort because it's yours. You understand? No one's going to teach you. No one's going to do the work for you other than you. You understand? So if you're treating yourself if you consider yourself to be sick, then see Wu-Sabat as the medicine that one needs to cure themselves of, as I say, the poison that was introduced to them in this Western society. Okay, so any questions?
Yes, there's a question from Corrine. I know we have to read and eat right, as well as support the foundation, but what else can we do to live right and transition to a better life?
I'm sorry, say that again. Let me just catch what she said in the beginning. Yeah, should we have to live?
It says, I know we have to read and eat right, as well as support the foundation.
Right.
But what else can we do to live right and transition to a better life?
Well, I mean, it's a good question you raised there, but don't ignore the sort of first couple of points that you made, because obviously it starts with that reading, isn't it? And then you're gonna utilize that to inform or change your actions based upon, in certain instances, if that's how you've come across this information, then you're going to use it to inform your actions. You understand? And obviously that read, doing stuff that matches what I'm reading about, you understand, in terms of the Pater-Acts, give me the way to live. You understand? You're implementing, spiritual practice. So one is exercising, obviously, their inner being, as well as taking care of their external vessel that is carrying, you understand, the mental, the soul aspect of you as an individual. All of those things are important. It's not one necessarily over the other. Of course, once you have got yourself to a certain level, it gives you the ability to work with others, and you have to start thinking about plans where, we can work our way out of this particular environment and return back home to, Africa, which is a big place, but certain places in Africa where we can build and establish, as I say, the living our culture. It's one thing to be in the Western Hemisphere trying to adhere to certain practices. It's another thing to be, re-establishing, like how Tamaray was at 476 acres in Georgia, where you're living your culture every day. You understand? Maybe working outside, doing different things, have business, etc. But when you get up in the morning, the environment around you is you're seeing things that relate to your culture, because that's how they lived in ancient Egypt. Isn't it? Everything, when they walk down the street, they stepped out of their house or whatever, they're surrounded by things that remind them and keep them in tune with their culture. So part of the individual practice is helping you to transform, but we now understand, as I mentioned earlier, about the 24%, the importance of your environment. So you have to create an environment, at least, or a place that's going to be conducive for you to optimize who and what you are. Understood? And that's what Tamaray was. On a certain type of surface level of it, maybe the English part. Oh, this is a beautiful theme. You understand? Theme park style where we can drive about on a minibus. Somebody's giving you a tour of those sites. On another day in the week, like on a Thursday, you understand? Yeah, those sites transformed into literal, you understand, spiritual exercises that aid individuals to transform themselves. Understood? Yeah, all different manner of sites. You understand? Materialization rite. Understood? Egyptian initiation ceremony, where it was a ritual. Where basically you were seeking to align yourself with the elements within nature. Various different rituals that obviously would have been a natural part of living in ancient Egypt. We sought to build Egypt to the west, and as I say, the hand of the Makasu sought to destroy that. So we have to rebuild that again. Those obviously who experienced even some of that way of life now understand its importance, especially in the time of sort of COVID-19, that we have to create these environments once again, and that's obviously started with a project called the Sanctuary of Yaanuwn, where we're starting to build these spiritual environments once again, which that one's in Trinidad. But then obviously once that one's finished, there'll be other ones around the world. So we have to start thinking about, as I say, coming together, living in environments for and by each other. And so that's why you have to master all aspects of self. It's not just a spiritual side. You understand? We're not poor righteous teachers. You've got to master the working side, professional side, business side, so on and so forth, because to make some of these things happen, you need strong finances. That's just the reality of the situation. If you want to live off the earth in this day and time, you need to own some land. so we have to utilize the fact that we've been born in the West. If you are listening in, born on this side, certainly take advantage of the opportunities. So when you go back to Africa at some point, what we want to do obviously is get the master free, so that plan is much more coordinated of where we need to be, the proper place on the planet, so on and so forth, so we can gather and do like Akon and others are doing. You're literally building, brand new cities, and we take our collective wealth and start to put it together and implement that 400-year generational plan. So we understand that the changes that we're making to self now are going to have the real impact, real transformational impact in 4 generations' time. You understand? Where all impurities come out in the 4th generation. So we need to be doing, when we're learning and absorbing and transforming now, that's going to allow the opportunity for future generations to become, you understand, even more perfect than we are in this day and time. Any other questions?
Yes, there was a follow-on question from Corinne. What's the best book or scroll which provides this information?
It's an interesting question. Fortunately, Corinne, you need to start with what you're interested in, you understand? Because it's quite a vast array of books going into different subjects, and you can't always judge it necessarily directly by the title. So I would, look up if someone's got a catalogue or whatever the case may be. I think maybe I had to post one in the chat. But you look at it and see what's of interest to you, and start your journey from there. Any other questions?
Yeah, there are no other questions.
Okay, so what I'll do, I'll put a catalogue in the chat area if I can upload it a bit later. So let's look at this introduction. as we sort of step into 9. So it says, let me, Atum Raye, inform you, it was me who guided the hand of Malachi Z, Dr.York, Okran from the year 2000. Before me were others. I am of the 9, born of Naunet and Naun. Yeah, so those starting points, isn't it? In the what they call the Ogdoads, overstood, which is the 8 before you get to the 9. But even the 8 is really 9 because it starts with Atum first. So Atum, Nununet, Hehihet, Kekiket, and Amunet. Understood? So that's starting point. Yeah, so it says, I am named from the primeal one called Tum, from the word Tamim, Mimat, so perfect, entire. You see here in Arabic, same word, Tamam, perfect. Mamat, in Arabic, entire. One who is a perfecter. I am here in order to perfect the way by way of the truth. Wu-Nawap or Wu-Sabat, now in this day and time. We, the 9, are the guardians of the underworld. That is Sirius or Cyrus, the chamber of the south in the book of Job, Ayub 9:9. I entered his body when he was first born. He is a medium, a channel. By way of him, we are able to transcribe outformation into information for you all. The lost, found people. We searched for you many years until he found you all amongst the sleeping under hypnotic trance, not remembering self and kind. We returned in 2003 and again 2013. 2013. You all were not ready to depart towards home. We tried to communicate by way of the white and red races. However, their nature was weak and wicked. We have visited the brown and yellow races. They are safe by way of us. And many white and red women are safe because by way of mixing their seed with others, because the end of their species has arrived. The year 2000 AD and 12/21 2012, the new cycle called 9 support deities in the language of the Mayas, engraved in the year 669, the Tortuguru inscription. It is now the 5th world, the first of the next 6,000 years, the 7th day, the millennium. We are from Orion and Sirius, guarding the overseers, the watchers. We will soon depart from here for the final time. You all are the 13th lost tribe, obviously Nawapians found, or Sabaeans found from the 9. So, a lot being conveyed in as I say, a couple of pages there. So, one of the interesting things, excuse me, it talks about that first stage, isn't it, that we mentioned earlier in the introduction, this Atumre, or this individual, and housing, as say, this being or body to convey certain information necessary for the day and time we're in. Understood? And the individual is explaining Atum, who is the perfecter. You understand? Now, Atum, when you get into the sort of deity names, it means, you understand? Oh, complete, undifferentiated son, in the sense, exact son. Because that first point, or cell, or egg, had everything in it necessary, isn't it, for creation to proceed. You understand? It wasn't lacking in anything. And out of it, you know, in terms of the first element, all of the other elements came, or they, you know, came out of that. So that perfection is an interesting term, because why are we here? We're seeking to be perfect. You understand? The word perfection with the ION at the end of it shows Yeah, an action word. It's in transition, correct? It's moving. But this individual is saying, I am the perfecter. So I'm going to take that which is imperfect and make it perfect. And I'm here in order to perfect. So this way of life called Wu-Sabat, or the culture of it, obviously has to be designed for the day and time that we're in. Because, we are our ancestors, but the genes have tumbled forward. And so, therefore, we're not exactly the same as what we were thousands of years ago. You understand? The environment, people who we've interacted with, intermixed with, has had an impact on who we are, as well as obviously our genes being intercepted and mixed with. Yeah, so previously we went through with you this about perfection, isn't it? You understand? And what the definition of that was. So in the book, The Spiritual You, or Master Secret, Spiritual You After the Physical You Dies, in verse 12, we see an inkling of this definition of what it is to be perfect, or what we are striving for. Yeah, it says, verse 12, as to you, Nagaru Negroes, yes, once your Ka'ah spirit separates from your Mashah flesh, you will continue to progress until you obtain perfection of being as well as body, becomes pure inside out, outside inward, a clean, pure Akal mind, where all your intentions rule your actions, your deeds are pure without personal reason or gain. A shuk, divine love, will give you a state of Hanan, grace. Understood? So this point of intentions ruling and matching a person's actions, and say, we did explain and gave some examples about that previously, but this is what the Atum Areye, or being, is seeking to perfect amongst us. You understand? Those obviously who listen, pay attention, apply what is being taught in terms of this way of life represented to us, as I say, for the day and time we're in the sense to take you from that what you became into the who again. Understood? Now, there was a lot of stuff packed in there, so let's try and deal with some of those issues. So you're informed that the underworld, or one understanding of the underworld, is taking us to the Sirius Star constellation. So the counter world to the one we're in, obviously, is Sirius, you understand, or Sirius, or the underworld, which again, is associated, or Sabatat, is associated with the deity Arashtat, who they falsely call Isis. You understand? And we explained to you before that the fact that the woman obviously is the bridge between the world of energy, or the world we came from, and she obviously builds around us this physical shell, understood, yeah, to be able to interact in the physical world. And we come into this world born upside down, we come head first, yeah, into the world, we come head first. So, as I say, and when we're in the womb, which is enough, if you look at a baby and you kind of drew the number 9 over the baby, we get curled up, we look like a 9 in the womb. Understood? So even in here, there's a lot of symbolism being given. But purpose is what? To transcribe Outformation, and give it to us in the form of information, which helps to transform us. So you have to look at the word here, formation. Formation is describing the person's physical structure. You understand? How you are formed. Understood? And again, it's got an ION on it. So it's obviously a transient state. Understood? Yeah? So we take in information, but we also are information. Yeah? In terms of informational present being. Now, there was some cycle stuff thrown at us here, or informed, at us here. So here, and you're going to have to do some homework on this. I usually do it for you, but I'm gonna show you again how looking at details is important, because it's telling you here new cycle called 9 support deities in what? The language of the Mayas. So you're not supposed to, when you're looking at this, you don't bypass that. If you're doing check it out, you're going to go and look at that up and look up the Totogoro inscription, so on and so forth. You understand? It's not a case of, okay, well, it's a black man, it's the master teacher teaching. Yeah, I know he's the guy, he's down or whatever. Let me just, follow exactly what he's saying. That's not what he's saying to do. He's saying, check it out. Yep. So that when you go and look these things up, you're going to see, it's going to open up another doorway, understood, of where your culture has been stamped in somebody else's culture, where somebody else has told your story in their culture, and you see, obviously, the interlinks between that. So that's homework today. You are asked to hold a pen and paper, understood? So when we drop some questions to you about this, you should be able to answer those, understood? 9 support deities. Yeah. Now, not going to go into that in too much detail, but that's a symbolic date. Yeah, 20. In England, we would look at that as a day, month, and then obviously year. So that would be usually at the front. So we know that's a symbolic date of the rise of the female back to power, and as I say, now known as 2000 was the hereafter doctrine coming in, hereafter, and then when this date kicked in, then it became the thereafter. So hereafter from 2000, hereafter the devil's rules ended, and then this date then brings in a cycle called the thereafter time period. Now, it tells you here it is now the 5th world, understood, and the first of the next 6,000 years, the 7th day. So what does all that mean? Well, we have to look at some calendar information here. So here we see basically a cycle showing 4 periods of 6,000 years. So one of the 24,000 year cycles, understood? Sun, moon, and then we transition into a sun, moon again. So in this last 6,000 years, or the 4th quarter, understand? Which they show you that in that movie, Any Given Sunday, which is a film about black devils, very interesting movie. But in the last 6,000 years, or in the 4th quarter, understood, a transition is taking place. So this is the age, one may say, inverting commas, or the eon of the Mukasu or the Caucasian. This is his story or history. It is that in this last 6,000 years, with the birth of their Adam, understood, which is their story, understand, and which is why they like to pigeon everything into a 6,000 year chronology, because it ties in with their book, the Bible. Now, what you have to realize is that it says 4th but not final. You understand? And so each one of these 6,000, so one cycle obviously represents a world, but then each of these different 6,000 year cycles is a world within a world. You understand? So they represent different eras where different races maybe came to the fore, were dominant, came into existence, so on and so forth. Now, why is the 4th important? Well, we were just showing you something on the screen, and we'll jump back to that just so you can see. Because at the end of that 4th cycle, isn't it? Yeah, the 9, similar we deal with numerology in our culture, but you see the 9 and the 6 clash; they're opposed to each other. You understand? So when you get to the 4th cycle of the 24,000 years, it equals 96, and so the 96, the 9 and the 6 are opposing each other. Understood? As I say, the 9 there represents mental power, and the 6, you see here with the G, 6 represents genitalia, genes, 6, sex, the sex force represents physical power. Understood? And so, in the day and time that we're moving into, the mind has to rule over matter, understand? Or your mental must dominate your physical actions, or your mental must now dominate your physical desires. So a person can't be led by their desires. It's one of the ways in which an individual loses their soul. If they're making decisions where they're not in control, so if I'm hooked up on crack cocaine or snorting heroin or whatever the case may be, and that's leading my decision making because of my desire for it, by way of, because I'm now addicted to it, then I'm going to lose my soul. I'm going to lose my connection because I'm not the one making the decisions. Understood? I'm not the one making decisions. I'm now being led by my physical. And so if you imagine like how we're connected by way of the internet today, it's like the router dropping out. It sounds like the signal dropping. Understood? This is why it can be restored again. Understood? But it's like, okay, boom, we're disconnected now. Not getting into that story too much, but there was a reason why that process was, so it didn't affect, obviously, higher levels of where we were, affecting higher levels of existence, because we're all interconnected. So certain protection obviously are put in place, so they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing according to who they are naturally. If they're involved in unnatural behaviors and acts, not by Western morals, but unnatural acts according to who they are, then it can force, as I say, a person to lose their connection. So you're seeing here, every equinox obviously is a world in itself. Understood? The planet going through a number of different changes, but at the fourth great cycle, as I say, there is a clash of the 6 and the 9. Understood? So the 6 never escapes the 9. Even 3 6s, as I say, is 18. You understand? Even though that's not the number of devil's number, really, according to that book, is 616, not 666. So you can see, as you can get out of pocket about it. Somebody on their driving license driving around with 666, you can be looking at them funny, but actually it's 616. There was a mistake in the language. So at 616, you see it innocently now connected, I think, with Marvel and other things, the musicians wearing it, 616, all that sort of stuff in it, and that is the true, what they call the mark of the beast or whatever, in their biblical story. Now, so those two opposing forces, Nupu, understand, and Zupu. But within us, the physical person's individual body, mind power and sex power. So you have to, both are, too much sex when you're on the come up, as I say, is bad. There's a song, I think it was in the 90s, understood, called Ghetto Heaven. You understand? I need a little ghetto heaven. And obviously that's talking about the pressure of the council estate of certain environments. You understand? The only kind of release or relief sometimes is sex. You know, or the pleasure derived from sex. And obviously its overuse can be burdensome. You understand? Because sex leads to children, children are beautiful and they're lovely, but they're also a lot of work. Understood? So when you're in the come up, we have to manage our sexual powers, because it is easy to seek pleasure in all kinds of ways because of the pressure of the hellish conditions that you find yourself in, or we find ourselves in. So this is something, again, 9-ball information, because for the amount of pleasure a person experiences, they have to experience the same amount of pain. Understood? Nature's rules for balancement. So you have to manage how one uses their sexual powers clearly on the come up, so to speak. Yeah, understood. So let's just get back to where we were. So we can see here that the fourth cycle getting into fifth, there's obviously a massive convergence taking place of a number of different cycles at the end of the fourth cycle. That's why they call it great, because a number of cycles are aligning at the same time. Understood? Or events in nature are happening at the same time, obviously. And one of those is the renewal of our story. So this Amun Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn comes at the end of the cycle, preparing us obviously for the new cycle that is to come in. Now, some people get confused because they talk about the seventh day is the first 1,000 years of the new cycle. So when you look at the biblical records and the Anunnaki and Pleiadian intervention to eventually create a being in their image and the likeness, which is the Adam story. Remember, you have something called, obviously you've got the equinox, which is a 24,000 year cycle, and then you've got something referred to as the epoch, which is the 50,000 year cycle. So remember, in their Bible story, they talk about 7 days of creation, but the word day there is the Hebrew word yom, and it means period of time. Understood? So if you think about it, when they came to terraform in their story, they talk about terraforming the planet effectively. Yes, terraforming, removing the dust particles from the atmosphere to allow the rays of the sun now to hit the planet and reduce the waters, because the planet was flooded or covered in water. It's because at that particular time, every 50,000 years, the crust of the planet shifts in the sand. Now, in their story, or the Sumerian story, it's not that God or this extraterrestrial caused the flood. Remember, as you were expressed to you in the Holy Tablets, they just didn't tell them about the equinox. So they're in their craft observing climatic changes happening, natural climatic changes that were happening, and they just didn't tell the people. That was their issue. They ain't going to tell them that it was coming. They didn't give no warning because they wanted them to be destroyed. Understood? Or certainly the being named Enlil or Nunamir, he was the one who wanted to see these so-called Adamites destroyed, in the early version of them. Let's keep it simple. Now, in that period of terraforming into them seeking to create an environment now to produce this individual on the 6th day, it is 7 periods of 7,000 years. Understood? So 7 periods of 7,000 years, and then Adam was born on the 6th day according to their calendar, which would be 42,000, correct? Be 42,000 years. Yeah. So when you look, it's codified because basically they say that 13 is the unlucky number, correct? But when you add these 7 periods together for this 50,000 year cycle, understood? Yeah. What happens? Year 2000, understood? So you take 2 24s broadly to make up that 50,000 year cycle. Understood? And what happens? You get to 48,000. Understood? But the completion of their project is at 49,000, isn't it? So there's an extra 1,000 years according of their calendar still to expire, you understand? And in them, it's understood to be the completion of that project. As we know, their God put an expiry in their genes, referred to as the telomerase, for it to expire by the year 2000, obviously. And now what we're seeing is evidence, coronavirus and other things, which are being designed to take out a certain type of hybrid, as part of their removal from the planet. And that's being done by their creators or overlords in that regard. Now, when you add 4 and 9 together, so 49, 4 and 9 together, what does it add up to? 13. So 13 is the secret number or the completion. This is why they don't like it. It says unlucky, well, it's not unlucky for us. It's unlucky for them who are going to expire as their time on the planet Earth is up. So it's pre-programmed in their genes. So there's a 49,000 year cycle, those 7 days or 7 periods, 2000 was 48, and then the additional 1,000 then becomes the 7th day. But it's also the first 1,000 years of the new cycle of 24,000. Understood? Yeah, which is the 5th world after that 4th world we just explained. Understood? So hence now, yes, we are in the first 6,000 years, of the new 24,000 year cycle, which also happens to be the last 1,000 year period of the Adamite project, so to speak, in the sun, which obviously is their power, dwindling, fading out, and will lead to their eventual, as I say, complete destruction. Other than when you looked here in the introduction, what did it say? It said, we communicated with the white and the red races, the Muadamu, the Adamites, understand, the red race, and then the Mukhasu, the Caucasians, which are the white race, you understand? Obviously, the Muadamu, red race, and then by way of leproma or leprosy, you understand? Obviously, you've got the white race here, the 2 different subspecies there of Caucasian in that regard. Now, here we see that, but they're safe. We visited the brown and the red, so stronger genes there, and they paid attention to what they were being told, so they're safe. You understand? They're on that phylogenetic tree for that dimensional shift, which has already taken place, and are part of the plans as it pertains to the planet going forward. You understand? To retain their existence. But it tells you here that many white and red women are safe because they're mixing their seeds with others. So we understood, or we explained this, I think, in the previous class, that the woman per se vibrates on a higher spiritual frequency than the male. You understand? And in terms of the white and red or Caucasian Gasu women, they are still shapeshifters, you understand, and have the ability to raise their vibrational rate. So they're vibrating higher than their man or Caucasian males at 6 ether range. But when she mixes with a man with stronger genes, she can raise her vibrational rate to match her man, you understand? And so this is why it's saying they're safe, because obviously if they have the right mindset, they're mixing their seed, it transforms them into, as I say, becoming Nubian. So, obviously, it works in reverse for the black woman. This is why, as I say, a person who want to do interracial mixing or whatever the case may be, that's their business. You understand? In Wu-Sabat, stay out of people's bedrooms is the kind of the mantra that kind of keeps things peaceful. However, the issue is that, as I say, we said it many times in this class, but it's the science of sex versus the art of it. So is it if people don't understand the science of it, and somebody is continually pumping things through the television and media, etc., promoting a certain type of agenda of miscegenation, then it's not fair that a person's just looking at a situation and just looking at it as you can't help who you fall in love with. That's always the line, isn't it? You can't help who you fall in love with. Yeah, I found love in this particular individual, boom, 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 boom. But if that's part of somebody else's plan to manipulate and take your genes, then it's only fair that you're aware of that and then can make a decision accordingly. If you then choose to fall now, not rise, fall in love, then that's your choice, and you know what you're giving up for the other person. You understand? But the reality of the situation is, partner, no partner, understood? Yeah. And that's the importance of partners, because if you've got a certain partner, you're locking into each other's fate. And if that's not your intention is to ascend, then you need to be choosing somebody who's about that life, so to speak, because it's going to cause you detriment in the long term. You understand? So fall in love, you understand, is, it's a problem. That's why sometimes they say it's better to care, you understand, as opposed to love, because it can cause you problems. People sacrificing, their fate, their destiny. When you say destiny, you're talking about destination for a loved one. You understand? Well, this is why it's tough. This is one of the reasons why it's tough. It's tough to reach perfection. I'm not saying to say that people must be out here cold up the place, you understand, just for self and all that. That's not what it's saying. What it's saying is, though, one has to have a certain level of focus if they're to achieve full transformation. And so, obviously, choosing the right partner is important to that. For a male, for example, it is the woman who is going to transform you. Yes, your woman's going to transform you because she's still linked in with the natural cycles of the planet, isn't it? By way of her menstrual cycle, lunar biology. So she's still connected to the heavens. So when nature transforms her, understood, she is going to transform you as your man. This is why there's so much focus on women. Yeah? Why, as we showed you that picture before, they want to create, unfortunately for those sisters, they want to use and abuse it, but they want to create a Nicki Minaj, a Megan Thee Stallion. You understand? Today, you can't even see, basically, you can't even watch a program now without a woman singing a song or whatever, and she's not basically looking like she's ready for the bedroom. This has become normalized now. You understand? In that way. And that's what gets created, as opposed to the sacred feminine, which nature wants to align itself with so it can imbue the sacred feminine with this power, and then she transforms, you understand, all, obviously, that she is with to be aligned again with natural nature. You understand? So this is where that focus is. Get them to, mess up the lineage, get them to mess up the royal genes. Understood? Hot girl summer, all this type of stuff. Yeah, get them to mess up the royal genes. You can do what men are doing, you understand, etc., under the term of equality. Well, yeah, cool. If it was about that, no problem. You understand? But equal doesn't always mean the same. You understand? So, or it doesn't mean the same. It does not mean the same. You understand? So, as we see, 360 degrees for the circle, 360 degrees for the square. So we have different responsibilities and roles in how this transformation is going to play out. But obviously, remember, as we get older, women become more male, and women become more male, and males become more female as we get older. Because what happens? The male's testosterone levels start to drop, the woman's estrogen levels start to drop. So as we get older and we get to that next level of growth, which is at 80 years old, what are we? We're becoming a more balanced being. Much like the original hermaphrodite and hermaphrodites, where we came from. Because as we're looking to transition from the physical back into the energy realm or etheric realm once again, there's no gender discussion. Yeah, as we reach in the higher orders, the ancient Egyptian order, the men and the women, they're wearing the same, you understand? Wearing the same outfits or uniform, so to speak. Yeah, so this is all natural nature, obviously, in playing out in that regard. So the cycles obviously are important, and as I say, each one of these 24 cycles represents a world, and each of 6,000 years is a world within a world. And this is where you see it here with these 24,000 year cycles, as we showed you. We get to that fourth one, 96. You understand? It's a major clash, and obviously in this instance we're seeing the rise of the female back to power. Maybe I say we do that class on 2 papyrus, we go into or revisit the lost records of time and update that as well, and get into that in a bit more detail. Any other questions? So I've got here. Okay, let me move on because I'm going to show this video. Okay, let me get moving. Any questions? I'll move on.
Yes, we have a question by Donata, I think it looks like. It says, Rahubat Zamal, Tawatak for your time in teaching this gift sent to us from above. Can you please explain the Z term you mentioned earlier? I was a bit confused and I didn't pick up on what was mentioned.
Okay, no, so basically what we was explaining in that term was to say the importance, obviously, of paying attention, because what we were showing here that in English, we were just giving an example. There can be many things that this is the case, but we were just showing you one example of the name. So Malachi Z, Kabina, York, or Kran, in English, it's a Z, isn't it? Yes? But in the language here, the name here, yeah, it's not a Z. Yeah, it is a so, to, te. So so, hardest, or hard so, just as in south, so, and it's a T there. Yeah, so like we would say saint in English, like short for saint, but it's so. Yeah, and then when you see it now in the transliteration, you can see, yeah, it's an ST, it's not a Z. So that's the point that we're making. It's not Okran, it's Akran. It's not Kobina, it's Kwabina. So in our language, it's got a different pronunciation. In misbat-iya, in Sabaean, it's got a different pronunciation. You understand? So it's got a different pronunciation, not to confuse it, but it's got a different pronunciation. So the point that we were making is that the 9 is introducing you into the ability to read in language, transliteration, and other books as well. You understand, not just this, but transliteration, and then in English. And so the point is that there's a different read there, which we need to elevate ourselves to, because there's a different kind of message in there than the one being expressed. So it's, let's say, causing us to pay a bit more attention to the details, understood, of what's going on. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay.
No further questions.
Okay. So, again, paying attention. So, we see another, so we see he's called the 9, yeah? Mutsa'u. Then we see, excuse me, another reference for the 9 as Sabatu. Yeah, which is the same word as Musbatu, yeah? And Sabat tied into the Sirius star constellation, which you read in the introduction, understood, yeah? So, in person saying they're a Sabaean, Musbatu, we understand that is connected to our relationship to the Sirius star constellation, because our ancestors came from Sabatat and Sabat, you understand? So Orion and Sirius, you understand? And which is why a lot of our monuments are aligned with these particular star constellations. So we see here the depiction, as I say, of the 9 or the Enneads, or the Sabatu as it's shown there, in a triangular form, understood? So all the 2, or the singular splitting into 2, gives birth to another set of twins, and then gives birth here to 2 sets of twins there. You understand? So, which is something in that. But you see here, showing how in the triangle it's showing a genealogical approach there, all coming from that singular point, atum. Yeah, so that cell splits, with the eye in a triangle above it. Now, the deity names, these are also deity names as well. in terms of the 9. So Mufkhamiya in the Sabaean language mean the majestic ones. Understood? Who called the Enneads. Now, here you see the term Yahye or Yahye, and it means O. So it's a mark of respect. Yeah, so a mark of respect to say Yahye against these deity names. So the 99 deity names in the Sabaean culture obviously is where they got the 99 elements. And they named them, some of the elements are named after people that they say discovered it in their story. So like 99 is Einsteinian. And named after Albert Einstein. Yeah. So we have the 99 deities, and they're split into 6 different categories relating to, as I say, the different elements. And so it's actually there's a benefit in learning all 99 of them. And for those who are a bit more studious, you may look at the corresponding element on the periodic table and master that aspect of it as well. Now, when you look at it, we see here that basically what's classified under the majestic ones is, in actuality, we see that there are 10 names. Even though we're dealing with the 9, we see that the last one, Yahye Hara, or Horus, they say, is included as the 19th deity, which also ties in, I think, to potassium. I've stood on the am I correct? Yeah, potassium, I think, as K on the periodic table. Now, here we see that basically, again, when you're looking at the language, that here it's written from right to left, isn't it? Yeah. So before, when we were reading the 9, it was left to right. Now we see it here, from right to left. So again, as you get more familiar with the language, you can see that in certain instances it changes direction. Some of it may be similar, close to English. Other times we're looking at it, it is reading in the opposite direction, more closer to, as I say, how we did things in ancient times. But the number in this instance, it should be paid attention to, but it's not showing here as a symbol in the language, at least in this iteration. Understood? So again, because it's on the page, or you may see it sometimes written down, pay attention to the whole of what's taking place here. So you're going to be interested in the misbat-iya meaning, so you want to be able obviously to read it in its original form. You want to be able to understand what's being said, so you need to understand what these words mean, and so you're paying attention to the whole as well as the number. So what the translation is, and obviously transliteration, and then the number you need to pay attention to. So some of the time when you're reading as well, and you may see a verse number, and I do as well, but you tend to skip it. You tend to skip that number. So if something's classified by a verse, you're reading, but you're not necessarily taking in the verse number. Whereas you need to consciously take in the verse number. You understand? Pay attention to everything's on the page, because it's a way to, in your brain, it's a way to classify and log information in an orderly form, isn't it? You understand? If you can see here, it's 10 to 19. That's in a certain type of order. And so so that's indicating to you, okay, you need to follow the order in a certain type of way or fashion, isn't it? It's not 19 to 10, it's going up, it's 10 to 19. So when you log the number, you're logging the information in a certain type of way. Understood? Yeah, like if you're on your computer and, if you're lazy, you just save everything, you understand, to the desktop, or I'm not saying lazy, maybe that's a bit harsh, but you're just saving things without any order. Just save it to the desktop, save it to documents. For somebody who's a bit more studious, so they can find it the next time, it's going to create folders with logical names, maybe have a proper filing system or whatever, how they name things, so they can find it later down the line. You understand? Because in the moment, you don't think nothing of it, and then when you try and find it, you can never find the same document. So you reading is you're programming your brain to classify the information in a certain type of way, so that when you pull it back out again, obviously it's easy to do that. It's easy to classify things. Now, if you're just learning it for yourself, if you're just learning it for yourself, you don't care about all of that kind of stuff, which is what a lot of people find themselves in. Okay, well, I'll do my chant every day, I'll do whatever every day, I'm just learning for self. But when you've got to explain it to somebody else, it becomes important. And this is where you're moving from selfish to selfless, because you're having to remember things. So, okay, I can explain it to the other person. You have to know it well enough to be able to explain it to the other person. Do you understand? And so these are things which that detail, if not for yourself knowing it, I mean, you learn that detail so you can you can give that information, or learn that well enough so you can give it to somebody else. You understand? Not be, well, I know it when I'm saying it in the chant, but then when somebody else, well, how does it work? How do you explain it? How does it? I mean, somebody might be new coming in or whatever. They want to know more about your culture. If you're out there wearing your cultural attire and they start asking you certain questions, okay, well, only fair you can explain it, isn't it? You understand? Or you have the ability to explain it. You don't have to be a top teacher or whatever the case may be. You just, as a Sabaean, you should be able to explain your culture. And so us transitioning from ignorance into the knowledge of who we are again, we have to be the ones to represent and be able to explain our culture when asked or offered, and know it well enough to explain what we want to convey and what we don't want to convey. In that instance, So you protect the secrets, but you also are explaining what can be told. You understand? That's about who we are. You understand? And that makes the culture real. Now, so we see the various different names, and in our language, obviously, it has different tones to what maybe the world may know it as, and sometimes that's noted here. And so, obviously, the majestic ones have different purposes, and have names and associated also with different symbols. So one of the ones, for example, we see here, safaf, natat, and shashash, shu, and tefnut here, breath and moisture, and sabab, as we say, but also geb, one of time. And I think we showed this before, but this is again some of the symbolism that sits in and around these deities. So, the reason why we didn't have faith and belief is because when you understand how thoughts arise, there isn't no room for faith and belief, because it's the result of a formulaic process. You understand? So, tefnut, as you see there, represented receptive thinking or thoughts from a mental perspective, because we're only picking it up, isn't it? You understand? We pick up the birth process, for example, from the point, or we log it, I should say, in time in this society from the point of conception. Correct? But before that, we've got inception. So there's a mental bit taking place before, you understand, that sperm obviously fuses with that ovum. And so in the mental aspect of things, you understand, not just in the birthing process, but the birth of thinking, thought itself, we represented. Remember, symbolism is bringing what? It's uncovering the powers of the hidden. So here, tefnut represented receptive thoughts. Shu represented, or shua, understand, or shashash represented perceptive thoughts. When receptive and perceptive thoughts come together, it gives birth to concepts. Understood? So sabab, or gibab there, or geb, associated with time, was shown, sometimes or certainly shown as the goose. You understand? Yeah? Which, in fact, we did do that. It was shown as the goose, right? Do we see a goose anywhere on the screen? Out of the 9? So is shown as a goose. Yeah, a bird of what? Two elements. Yes, air and water. A bird of two elements, air and water. Air and water. See how detailed our ancestors are? Yeah, we know the goose laid the golden egg. We know the golden egg is also can be symbolic of the sun. It's and the golden egg. But everything your ancestors did, there's a meaning behind it. Every detail, understood? So there wasn't room for faith because all thinking is the result of a process, understood? Very similar to, you understand, how we birth life is how we birth thoughts, you understand, in that regard. Yeah, so as above, so below. So the deities, there's obviously interest and symbolism behind names, why they're mentioned, so on and so forth, why they're positioned. And this is something that we, obviously Wu-Sabat peels back the spell and forces us to want to find out, you understand, what's going on, what does it mean, you understand, and put that interest, task the subconscious mind, obviously with the task of uncovering my story or this mystery, you understand? So we see today in modern day science, interesting enough, that basically, and this is something the master taught us well over, probably what we in that 2000 and, maybe close to, well over 20 odd years ago. You understand? We were learning about mitochondrial DNA in great detail. And interesting enough, you see on this picture here, what do we see? We see that now, all of a sudden, you understand, science is talking about, scientists are talking about mitochondrial DNA in relation to the sperm. When you talk about mitochondrial DNA or mitochondria, you're relating it to, generally speaking, to obviously the female. Well, you've got mitochondria, which is the battery or energy of cells, and then you've got mitochondrial DNA. Now, interesting thing is when you look at the holy tablets, going all the way back to 1996 through 1998, I'm just going to share an aspect of my screen. Now, holy tablets, hopefully you can see my screen. So in tablet 8, you can see there, chapter 1, tablet 8, we're looking at verse 50, look at verse 59. It says, at the center of an atom is a smaller particle called a quark, the father of energy, which in itself was produced by the mother of all energy, BIAPs, subatomic particles. And as in the cells beneath the cell or in the DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Then there's a nucleus, a dense cluster of protons and neutrons on the outside of the quark. Why do we refer to it as mother? Well, the mother mitochondria located on the Y chromosome, is the male equivalent to mitochondria DNA, called YAP DNA. That is the same as when a female is pregnant with a male child, only without male sperm, as in so-called asexual cell splitting into a daughter. So this is something referred to as virgin birth or parthenogenesis. Women able to fertilize their own ovums using two glands either side of the vaginal orifice, referred to as the Bartholin gland. So that was secreted at one time, a seminal type fluid, which enables women to fertilize their own eggs. So asexual reproduction, as it's explained here, is really F-sexual reproduction, as it says in verse 63. So in actuality, asexual cells are really F sexual cells for female sexuality. The word mitochondria is from the Greek mitos, warp, thread, and the Greek chondrion, diminutive of chondrus for grain or granule. So, yeah, mitochondria are tiny bodies within a cell that are responsible for the production of energy through the breakdown of sugars. Then mitochondrial DNA is in the female, which produces the male in so-called asexual fashion. So, let's switch back to where we were. So we see here basically that we see that the mitochondria on this sort of a microscopic image of the sperm, and we see that mitochondria or YAP DNA that we were taught about over 20 years ago. You understand? So we were being informed by the Holy Tablets of it's a highly scientific book. It's highly scientific information. Do you understand? So because I don't want to worship your white Jesus, I don't want to worship your red Arab Muhammad or whatever the case may be, because we don't want to do that, we want to learn about the higher sciences of the universe and how life works and who we are, how we got here, so on and so forth. That makes us a cult. But we're learning the stuff in advance, or our ancestors are conveying to us information that scientists now are just confirming in this day and time with the rise of modern technology. But in our stories, overstood, are that scientific understanding if we see or understand the symbolism. Because we talk about 9 deities, you understand? And we talk about 9 deities, versing energy into one form, to create the universe in our symbolic stories, of this Sabatu, you understand? Suggest various different names for the 9. Now, so the male lineage or YAP DNA or mitochondrial DNA is being held in the the tail area, and obviously when the sperm and the ovum come together, understood, the tail bit drops off. And so this bit fuses, so any kind of YAP DNA that's being retained there basically is absorbed by the woman's mitochondrial DNA. Hence why our lineage only goes, as males, only goes down 1 generation. Do you understand? Because basically the bit that was holding our genetic history is not fused with the cell. So it's not fused with the ovum, excuse me. Understood? And so the history drops off at this point, and so that's why you get this. But the point is that in the Holy Tablets, you were taught about this, you understand, to over 20 years ago. And will be familiar with this, which modern day science is now picking up in more detail today. When you look at the tail of the sperm here, which has been sliced open, what do we see? We see these 9 kind of rings, don't we? Or tubes. 1, so let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is that 9 tubes? Yeah, so the sperm obviously is carrying the star of life, and obviously it brings it to the ovum for them to fuse together. This is our story, isn't it? Our journey. Again, different structures of these centrioles, 9 tubes versing this energy into one form, which is what the word universe means, which is what we are as babies. We are a universe who came from a dual verse, which is obviously our mother and our father. So in this triad principle, them two coming together, 1/3 your mother, 1/3 your father, the 2 of them coming together creates a new you. You understand? Yeah. Sharps, flats, and majors. Understood? Yeah. Female sharp, male flats, us as the child, you understand, is the major. Understood? FAC. Now, so we see here various different forms of the sperm, you understand, and then we see here again microscopic detail of the of the tail with the 9 centrioles there. And we see our symbol, isn't it, for the 9 at the front of the book, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the circle bit is the 9 in our number system. Understood? So everything that we do, or your ancestors did, which you're now relearning about, has meaning. So don't come to us and talk to us about plagiarism. Yeah, don't come to any Nagar Nadu with awareness. Don't come to us as students of the Master Teacher. Don't come to the Master Teacher talking to us about plagiarism. When you came after us, you wasn't around when these things were being formulated. Actual facts, even by your own studies. So don't come to us about plagiarism, understood, when we are breaking down to you the science of the safaf. When the Master Teacher is bringing to you the science of the safaf. Because whoever put the safaf together knows full and 100% knowledge of what took place from the very origin of everything. You understand? Because we're stepping into the darkness. You can only talk about what is taking place in the light. You don't have knowledge about the world of things, which we're giving you an inkling of by use of our symbols. So don't talk to us about plagiarism. No Jew can come to a knowledgeable misbat-iya individual and talk to us about anti-Semitism, when Sem is a priesthood in ancient Egypt. The notion of anti-Semitism itself is anti-Semitic because it's a stolen word from our culture. It is time for us to start stepping up, understood, learn our stuff well enough and stand up and take back that which is rightfully ours. Because the world doesn't want to give the credit to the original or to the source. Even in their Bible, it says, honor thy mother and father so their days will be long and prosperous. And the world doesn't want to honor its true mother and father, so hence, in their telomerase, they're going to expire and no longer be here. You understand? So we want to be respected again. It's nice to be loved. Better to be respected. Which is why we have to build back, understood, that which was taken from us. You understand? Without them, if necessary. Those who want to respect us for who we are, no problem. We can flex. You understand? I don't have to put my manan, you understand, in you to respect you. You understand? To care for you. I don't have to put my manan in there. You understand? But we can still respect each other. We can still flex. But stop playing the authority. Yeah, this is why the world is in so much trouble that it finds itself in today, is because they don't want to be transparent, you understand, or open up about, understand, what they really know about how things happened in the past and how those cycles, as I say, are going to affect us now in this day and time. And the only one who's looking out for us is the one sent to us, which is, you understand, our own Master Teacher, whose freckles, maybe for some, are too close, understood, because he's the one kicking out the knowledge, preparing us, you understand, which is not just beneficial to the Nagar Nadu or the black race, but it's beneficial to the world. The world cannot function without a functioning Africa. It cannot function without us being at our optimum level as caretakers. Supposed to be caretakers of this planet. Yeah, but we find ourselves trapped in this particular society, in the 9 to 5, in the fake life, as one would have it today, understood, and not the real life and what our real and true purpose, alignment, purpose, and ascension pathway is supposed to be. So the majestic ones, understood. So we can see here, and this is a fairly old, book. But for the purposes of this, as I say, we'll just look at these just so you can see different symbols. I'm running a bit out of time, so I'm not going to cover every single symbol here just for time. So I'm going to get this video on at some point. Now, so let's hand select a few. So I've over talked a bit. Let's hand select a few. So we can see here, for example, that in her left hand, Tafafna Tat or Tefna is holding the Ankh. Understood? And some of you obviously be familiar that the Ankh itself obviously represents generative principles within males and females. So the genitalia in males that produces life, and the genitalia in females that produces life as well. So we see the downward aspect represents the phallus, and then the upward circular part obviously represents the womb. You understand? So two things coming together produces children, which is the key to the next world, known as the Ankh or the Anach. You understand? It also has another meaning, some say, which is related to the Nile. You understand? Or the Nine River, as we would also know it as. You understand? Nile is what the Greeks referred to it as. So if we look here, I'm just going to share my screen again, and we just go to Google Earth. And so basically, it might be a little bit jerky for you guys, but just bear with us. So you can see here that the origin of the Nile is Lake Victoria. Understood? Yeah. So just click in there. We can see it's a very large body of water. Understood? In terms of Lake Victoria, and obviously from this, stems the Nile, and then where the blue and white Nile join. So if we look at that marker there, it might be a little bit jerky for you, but just bear with us. So you can see here the Victoria, see that? If you can, but the Victoria Nile, this river here, and then you can see if you follow that all the way down, so we carry on, Victoria Nile, boom, follow that, and keep going. Interesting journey. Victoria Nile, we see it eventually flows then into what they're classifying as the white, flowing into the White Nile. You understand? So, and from here, so if I click Nile, let's just click it. If we click into the Nile river here, let's just so when we click into the Nile here, let's just let it move and do what it's doing. Obviously, we can see here quite far away in the sun that obviously all the way up here to the blue and white Nile, but its origin here is in Lake Victoria. You understand? Obviously, right, it's one of the longest rivers, I think the longest river, in the world. But its origin is in obviously South Africa, obviously traveling all the way up to North Africa. So the circular part of the Ankh, or the Anach, represents Lake Victoria. Understood? There's another symbolic meaning as it pertains to that. So it, as I say, the circular part of the Ankh pertains to Lake Victoria. Understood? Yes, and then the downward part represents the Nile, and then this cross part where the original cross came in represents a dam across the Nile. You understand? So this is another symbolic meaning of the Ankh, and obviously you see it's connected to the deity Tafafnatat, who is associated with moisture. Yes. Here we see, let's go to another one. So you can see Arashtat or Isis or Aset, they say, yeah, and we've explained about the throne before, so I don't need to go into that in detail. See it in, you just probably about see it on top of her headdress there. I see her holding the Tet symbol, again, symbolic of the blood in the body. Understand, but also the little people, obviously the Sands people, the Patahites, where we all came from. Interesting enough, if you look, can you see that it looks like a knot or a fold? Can you see that there on the body there? A knot or a fold that's coming down there, obviously representing that. And you can see, look, the way her belt is tied. And in fact, all of the 9, you see the way their belt is tied. You see it's tied in that fashion. Yeah. Symbolizing that obviously blood or Tet symbol within the body. Understood? So everything, as I say, that we do and did, it has some meaning. This is why you need a master, incarnated master, who was there, which was here when the word was said, to come and re-inform you, yeah, of that which obviously we have forgotten. Understand, by way of the spell. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this is, we're seeing here a lot of these symbols in this regard, and obviously you've got different deities holding, yes, different symbols in relation to that. So it all means something, which is why, as I say, we've expressing this for us to pay more attention to what is taking place within our culture. You understand? Yeah, this is part of the spell breaking, understood, that is required. Understand? Because of time, we're going to revisit this. We may revisit this. At the moment, let's say we're going to move on just so I can get this video out. Now, at 19, remember we told you there was 9, but there was 10 in this section. Mufhamir, the majestic ones, understood, of the 9. But the 10th individual is Hara. Understand? And Hara is the first demi-deity, understood? And when we look at the mitochondrial line, understood, coming from within the 9, you see what? Extraterrestrial, and then what? Ha or Horus at 19, understood, whose name means the far one, is the first demi-deity. Understand? So part extraterrestrial, part humanoid. Understood? Part extraterrestrial, part humanoid. Obviously, what? Ha1. Yes, Ha1, or as they call in science, the human accelerated region. Understand? Ha1. Understood? Which is that bridge. Understand? It's a chromosomal bridge or configuration, let's say, that links us to our ancestors, and not only our ancestors, the home of our ancestors, as Razak or Riz. Understand? And it's one of the reasons, as I say, the R1 gene is one of the reasons why we've accelerated over and above the animal kingdom, because, and it's evidence, as I say, of engineering, understand, programmed engineering, which has been designed, as I say, to trigger certain genetic explosions, which, as I say, cause women, for example, to speak first, cause us as men to draw first, in this regard. So at certain points of our development or growth, there's been interception in line with the natural system of things that has caused us, as I say, to seek to advance to that next level. So Horus or Hara understood represents that in as us, understood, yeah, say, as the 19th deity, Hara, as Hawa, demi-deity, part, as I say, extraterrestrial, part, say, earthling or humanoid, designed obviously to in-house or inhabit this water planetary environment. Any questions?
Yes, we have a question from Sakamtat, and the question is, what does the black man give up spiritually when he mates with a white woman?
Good question. Sorry, I'm just looking for something, and that's why I may have turned away slightly. Just bear with me one moment. In answer to your question, when a man goes through any, I suppose, sexual process, remember, say, from an energy point of view, he is weakened. Say, when a woman goes through a sort of sexual process, she's weakened from a DNA perspective. I suppose because of their physical structure, I suppose he's not particularly giving up anything in that regard. Obviously, if he gets with that woman, then she kind of rises up or transforms to his vibration. But what you got to appreciate, you're not looking at two stars there. You understand? So if you imagine when a black man and black woman get together, or two Negroids come together, remember they're star people, isn't it? So two star people coming together produces star children. What you're looking at there, I suppose, in one instance, depending on her genetic makeup, because you can't always tell just from the way the person looks, but it's a live star dealing with a white dwarf. Understood? So whilst, as I say, the mixing of genes brings her into the family, so to speak, you may see evidence of that individual being drained, understood, by that star, because the individual has aspects of her that are feeding off him as opposed to enhancing him. You understand? And so you may see certain characteristics of the individual that look like, as I say, the person looks a bit more drained. Maybe their skin is not as, doesn't look a certain way. Maybe it's not as hasn't got that certain shine to it. Now that's not always relating to interracial relationships, but it's showing, as I say, a draining of power. You understand? So the individual is feeding more off of that person, understood, because of their different genetic traits. You understand? I.e., recessive versus dominant. So he's not designed, I suppose, to lose in that way. And males obviously are protected in a certain sense, obviously, because it's their ability to have that delivery mechanism to seed, you understand, those eggs, or fertilize those eggs in that way of, as I say, mating. And so it's not the only way of mating, but in that way of mating. So it doesn't lose in that regard, if you're saying giving up something spiritually. The woman, or in that instance, that Mukasa woman, has the ability to transform herself, because you still have those shape-shifting qualities. So she can rise up in vibration in relation to match her man. So she's matching the frequency of her man to be able to produce children. So that trait or quality obviously remains in her, but as expressed, you understand, because they're potentially of two opposing genealogies, he might find himself physically more drained, as a result of that individual, just because of the purposes of race. So remember, in an optimum situation for mating, obviously, a Nagaru Nadu is going to look for and Naga are the female, and they're going to be soulmates in the true sense of the word. And ideally, you understand, a male who is 7 years older than the woman he's with, likely they're both of the same level of maturity mentally. So men don't mature as quickly as women, and so if you're looking for, I suppose, an optimum balance, then that's pretty much where it's going to be. They're likely to be the similar intellectual. Does that mean that you can't go with an older woman or a younger man, so on and so forth? No, it doesn't. It happens. But if we're talking about optimum, then those are the things that obviously you're going to be looking for in that regard. And generally speaking, we understand, if you're going to get married or things of that nature, then younger than 25 is probably not from any moral sensibility or issue, but younger than 25, you understand, it's probably not best. So you want to mature a bit more, whatever the case may be, in our settings. But it doesn't always happen. But as I say, if you're looking for optimum scenarios or situations, then that's what we like to build. That's what we're building forward on, which is what the Ba'h B'ah is about. Building forward for optimum living, so that future generations, or starting with our generation, but future generations, that would then become more the norm. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. Any other questions?
No, there are no further questions.
Something I was looking for, I wanted to add to that hard one breakdown, but I'll leave that for now. So let's just go through a few chapters. Because of time, I'm probably going to just cover a few of these, just because I want to hit this video. Now, Thames are dead. You understand? So it gives us called not before. And so it gives us a number of different markers that when we'll become, our goals or targets, when we will become at a certain status as a people. You understand? So it's quite an interesting chapter for us to know this. Yeah. So it says Aye Mumra, which is where the word more really actually comes from. But it's another story for another day. But Aye Mumra Munwapu Rahuh Panen. And we're going to change Munwapu to Musbatu. Yeah, we need to see that just because of the updated terminology. So my beloved Musbatu or Sabaeans know this. Yeah. 1. Leme anun hayo hayen baranun nun anun avir takwumun. When we live upon our own land, we are a nation. Thames are dead, not before. So, people are asking, okay, tribal status, nation. So it's telling you when we have our land and when we're on it, understood? That's what makes us a nation. Yeah, Athu or 2. Yeah, Lameh Anun Marun Hathab Nun Anun Sayur Shabatun. When we practice our own culture, we become a tribe. Thames are dead, not before. Understood? Yeah. Lameh Anun Banu Makdash Ria Nun Lehe Namazur Famem Anun Avir Sa'amun. When we build our own sanctuary for prayer, then we are a religion. Yeah. Thames are dead, not before. Yeah. Lame Anun Natuk Lahaj Nun Anun Avir Shachasuun. When we speak our language, we are a people. Thames are dead, not before. Yeah. Lame anun anud kanas nun nun lehe hayur bi thamem avir amkum mutharu. when we have our own canon to live by, then you all are ones who are civil. Ones who are civil. Terms are dead, not before. Lameh anun hayuh lehe shalel Wu-Sabat yachar famem anun avir yasar. When we live for, of, and by each other, then we are family. Terms are dead, not before. Yeah. 7. La me anun kale namuz adeh anun sayur ta'ahduhun. When we all pray together, we become a congregation. Yeah, terms are dead, obviously not before. So there are markers given in terms are dead, which basically are setting out for us our growth, obviously, as a people. You understand? And so we have to understand what those tests are and what the goals are for us to evolve to become one as a people. You understand? So these obviously are collective goals that an individual can't complete on their own. They can only complete with the help of tribe, family, nation, which are things that we obviously have to put in place that were not there before. You understand? That were taken away from us, and so thus have to be restored. You understand? Which is what the masters you read in the introduction, obviously as a Tumre, as the perfecter, coming to perfect the way of life. You understand? Coming to introduce, implement these things. So once at a certain point in time, when they've transitioned and gone, we are on the pathway to perfection. Once again, our way of life supports that ascension pathway. That way of life optimizes us as a people by environment and also the individual person, clearly. And our way of life is helping us, say, to tie in, stay aligned with natural nature and tie in, continue, or stay tied in with our ancestors. Okay, just because of time, I'm going to hit this video because it's an hour long. And it's going to take us over class anyway. So at this point, if you are on Facebook, please join us on using the link and join us on the Zoom platform. So I'm going to switch over to this video, which I think you're going to find interesting. I think you're going to find interesting. A very rare video called Cosmic Africa. Yeah, in that regard. But any questions before we switch to this video?
No, there are no questions.
Okay, so let me get this prepped. I'll give you a couple of minutes to switch over. And we're going to get this thing started. So bear with me just one moment. So this does tie in a little bit, I suppose. Is it time to what we talked about today? A little bit, I think. Yeah, I think it does tie in a little bit to what we're touching in today. Yeah, a little bit, but it's preparing us for a class, as I say, that we're going to do in the future. In fact, what I will say is, let's see, go here. So, Nabab-tat Hatat, yeah, or Nebthys, yeah, so one of the house, is holding in her hand Sechem. You understand? The word Sechem or Secham, it means power, understood? And it also ties into stars, or associated, can mean stars as well, like suns, yeah? So as a nice tie-in, yeah, that's where we're going to take it from. Yeah, one of the house. Understand? Yeah, Nabab-tat Hatat. Okay, so let's switch to this video, and then let's know what you all think about it in the comments if you found it interesting or useful. Okay, so let's switch.